In the Idaho 4 case, we now know that Brian Kohberger allegedly, anyhow, bought a K-bar knife from Amazon.com. Here's a weighty legal question. Will the evidence of bushy eyebrows be allowed in the trial?
Did Brian Kohberger have some incriminating purchases on Amazon? I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And this is becoming quite the news. This is a piece of the puzzle that a lot of people have been missing and wondering about for a while now.
Well, yeah, now for over 2 years, I have been complaining about all the secrecy, the non-dissemination order. So much has been shrouded in secrecy. Now things are beginning to come out in dribs and drabs and big things. One of the things that just has been released in the last couple of days is this selfie. Here's a selfie that the prosecution just unveiled. It is said to have been taken by Mr. Kohberger at 10:31 in the morning of November 13th, the day of the horrific crimes in Moscow, Idaho. And it would be approximately 6 hours after the tragic murders. Lainey, what do you think of this picture?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. It's a little surprising that this would be a few hours later and he looks so showered and put together, buttoned up. But like you can see, it looks like his hair might be wet. It is very bizarre to think about the fact that, if he is found guilty, that this would mean that happened and he was feeling like so good the rest of the day that he's taking pictures with his thumbs up. But this is not how you imagine someone who committed M either. So it feels almost eerie.
No, what I'm wondering is if indeed and on this channel, we have respected the presumption of innocence until unless proven guilty. And until, these revelations came out, I felt that there was very little actual evidence. I'm keeping my mind open, but I don't know if you had committed these horrible acts, why would you be taking a selfie of yourself in the bathroom, which is where this appears to be 6 hours later? Now, some people have noticed, and I don't know if I really see it. If you blow it up a little bit, people have said, well, look, there might be a bruise under his thumb there. I don't know. There's a shadow, obviously. And if there's a bruise, that's all. If he did what they say he did, wouldn't there be more? I mean, sometimes I'm playing with the dog, and one time she bit me, so there was that. I do a lot of garden work, and so in the summertime, I do tend to get bruises and cuts. I mean, I know this was November, but, there are 1,000 other explanations for that. And the other thing is, how after Mr. Kohberger was arrested in Pennsylvania at the end of December of 2022, they then got warrants to go into places, including his apartment in Pullman, Washington. And they said, oh, there was no shower curtain in his bathroom. And when this picture first came out, people said, oh, look, there's no shower curtain. He already destroyed it. Well, I don't know about that. Look at that. Am I seeing things? Am I making things up there?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, but on the right, for anybody looking along, it looks like there's a slight discoloration where it almost looks gray behind him, but then you're seeing a little bit more white on the right, about like in the right side. Yeah, so suspicious if there was no shower curtain. But then it's also interesting too, because he had there's so many questions about this case, because one of the things that keeps coming up is that he was supposed to be a student, a criminology student, and know so much better than all of this. Like, had it been the Amazon, had like the shower curtain missing. Is there a shower curtain in this picture? Did he take it off after this? This is very bizarre.
He looks awfully jolly for somebody that just committed things like that. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know.
It looks like he's got some bags under his eyes, but I feel like surprisingly looking well rested despite the circumstances.
Well, I get bags under my eyes because sometimes I get kind of stressed out at work if I have a crushing bunch of stuff going on during the week and I can't sleep, or I wake up early to get some work done. I have bags under my eyes. That doesn't mean I committed some heinous act. So I don't know. A lot of people have what they call raccoon eyes. So I really don't.
Yeah,
I don't know. I really don't. But this photograph was released as an exhibit to the state's objection to Mr. Kohberger's defense attorney's motion to exclude all reference to bushy eyebrows in the trial. So Kohberger's attorneys want to exclude all reference to bushy eyebrows. And we mentioned that in a previous episode. But now this is the state's response saying, no, that's not fair. We think that we should be able to bring this into the trial. So here's the motion that the state, I should say, brought. State's response to defendant's motion in limine regarding the witness identification by bushy eyebrows comes now the state of Idaho by and through the Latah County prosecuting attorney and hereby responds to the defendant's motion in limine regarding witness identification by bushy eyebrows. Defendant's basis for his motion are that the Idaho Rules of Evidence, Rules 403, 601, and 602. Applying the Idaho Rules of Evidence to the facts of this case at hand, the court should find Dylan Mortensen's descriptions of the intruder, including that he had bushy eyebrows, admissible. So now they go into it. They recite facts that our regular viewers all know, the basic facts. So let's pick it up on this page here. We all know that the alleged Idaho 4 crimes occurred on November 13th of 2022. 4 days later, on November 17th of 2022, Dylan Mortensen was interviewed by Idaho State Police Detective Victoria Gooch and Moscow Police Department Captain, then Sergeant Dustin Blaker. Dylan gave a detailed recounting of what she did on Saturday, November 12th, 2022, until she went to bed at approximately 3:20 a.m. on Sunday, November 13th, 2022. Defendant's Exhibit number 6, pages 19 to 50. Now, sometime between 4 a.m. and 4:20 a.m., Dylan woke up and heard a male's voice, a voice she did not recognize, say, "It's okay, I'm here to help you." Dylan Mortensen opened her door and she saw
someone, because from my mind, it's like I was almost wearing these like blurry glasses, like it's fuzzy and cloudy, but it was like a figure of someone wearing all black. And it was like they had a ski mask that was covering their forehead and their chin and their mouth. But I could see the eye. All I remember was seeing their eyebrows. I don't remember what their eyes look like, but I remember their eyebrows. I just don't remember the color the eyebrows were. I just like remember like bushy eyebrows. That's all I could think about.
Now, as you're reading that, I'm putting on my defense hat and I'm saying, in cross-examination, this statement is going nowhere. Isn't it true that you acknowledge that it was fuzzy and cloudy? Isn't it true that you admit that you don't remember? Isn't it true that you say you don't remember what their eyes looked like? Isn't it true if you don't know what their eyes look like, you didn't know what their eyebrows looked like? Isn't that true? Isn't it true you said that you didn't remember the color of the eyebrows? So
even just all that, I feel like bushy eyebrows are something so subjective where it's not even just like the not remembering it part. It's like, what's a bushy eyebrow? Like, are my eyebrows bushy? Like, some people might think so. Some people got pencil thin eyebrows.
Do you remember our friend who helped us with these episodes when we were first starting them 2 years ago? And we first started looking at the bushy eyebrows thing, Doug Cope, and he asked me, he says, "Mr. Myers, you have bushy eyebrows. Where were you that night?" In any event, Dylan described the male as not skinny tone, that basketball kind of type. Dylan stated she is 5'10" tall. Now remember this. So she thought the male was around 5'10" and then 6 feet, somewhere around there. Dylan stated the male was approximately 3 feet from where she was standing. I would say about 3 feet from what I remember. Again, that could be of cause I obviously probably still a little bit drunk. I just woke up. I don't remember fully. Again, she described the male.
I know he looked at me because I could see his eyebrows. I think I just saw one eyebrow. I don't why or how.
So, Ms. Mortensen, you concluded that he has bushy eyebrows when you only saw one eyebrow. Isn't that true? So Dylan recounted calling and texting her roommates, Bethany Funk, and she discussed with Bethany Funk that there was someone in the house wearing all black and a ski mask. Dylan conveyed to the interviewers that the facts didn't fully make sense to her, and she didn't know how to explain everything. Detective Gooch explained to Dylan that the important thing was to tell only the things she knew were true. So he coached her. That's the most important, he said. Detective Gooch acknowledged Dylan Mortensen's trauma. Detective Gooch and Detective Gooch and Captain Blaker confirmed the facts from Dylan Mortensen's memory again. Dylan Mortensen reiterated she saw a male figure in the hallway approximately 3 feet from her. He was holding something he was wearing. That was the vacuum cleaner type object. He was wearing all black clothes. His forehead was covered. He was wearing a mask. She remembered his eyebrows. Captain Blaker asked what was covering his face, and Dylan Mortensen said,
I don't know, weird looking ski mask. It wasn't like the regular ski mask with like eyes and because I saw his eyebrows and I think I saw his nose and like this part of his face, but I don't know.
Detective Gooch asked Dylan Mortensen if she knew what a balaclava. Am I saying that right?
Balaclava?
How do you say it?
Balaclava.
Okay. So Detective Gooch asked Dylan if she knew what a balaclava was and showed her a picture. In response and addressing whether she could see the male's mouth, Dylan Mortensen stated,
no, and I don't remember if I saw it. Like, I don't remember if I saw his nose, but I know I saw his eyebrows, and I don't remember his eyes. I just feel like I can see eyebrows, but I mean, that could be it. I mean, that would make sense of why the forehead was covered and this part of his face was covered.
Now, Ms. Mortensen, in a previous statement, isn't it true? You said you only saw one eyebrow. Isn't that true? And don't you agree with me that you've contradicted yourself here by saying you saw eyebrows? So anyhow, this is rife for cross-examination. This is why the investigators should have worked in unison. They should have sat her down, taken one statement, and taken it. But anyhow, the investigators inquired if Dylan Mortensen could provide a composite for an artist. Dylan responded,
no, I don't remember what his eyes look like. I don't remember what his nose looked like. I just remember eyebrows. I don't know exactly what the eyebrows look like at all, really. I just remember thinking, like, eyebrows. Yeah, bushy, that's all. Like, I don't remember the shape. I don't remember, like, the color. I just remember, like, bushy eyebrows. That's the only thing I can remember.
Oh, so Ms. Mortensen, you said right here, isn't it true? Don't you agree with me that you said you don't know exactly what the eyebrows look like? Isn't that true?
Well, like you mentioned before, it keeps going bushy eyebrows to, like, a single eyebrow. So it would have been better if she could recall if it were a unibrow or not, but she just seems to remember vaguely eyebrows.
Well, I remember back in law school, which was more years ago than I want to admit, and I was on the moot court board, and we also had trial skills classes, and I think even the worst student in the class would be able to cross-examine the dickens out of these statements. But in any event, having said that, let's stay on track, Mr. Myers. On December 1st, 2022, 18 days after the first interview, Dylan Mortensen was interviewed by forensic interviewer Aaron Williams. So it wasn't enough they've got enough contradicting statements. Now they bring in another person. And Dylan gave another detailed accounting of Saturday, November 12th, 2022, until she went to bed on Sunday, November 13th of 2022. Defendant's Exhibit number 7. And please see pages 20, 21, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Dylan reported she heard a man's voice, and it was not Ethan's. It was like, it's okay, I'm going to help you. Dylan stated she saw
All black figure about my height, maybe a few inches taller, skinny build, wearing a mask.
Dylan also described...
I don't remember if it was just like one eyebrow or two, but it was just like bushy eyebrows.
Dylan Mortensen texted Bethany Funk.
There's a guy in all blank.
And again, Dylan Mortensen described the ski mask.
I couldn't see any of his hair, but I remember just like seeing it was like almost rectangular and not the circular ones. It was rectangular because I remember seeing like just like I don't know how to explain it. Just seeing like this. Maybe I'd be able to see like across, but I don't remember seeing his eyes, but I feel like his eyes were there. I could just see like an eyebrow. I feel like that's how I know he saw me because I could see his eyebrow. Like if I can see his eyebrow, he can see me.
And then Dylan Mortensen reiterated.
From what I remember, I think he was just like walking past that little wall and going towards the kitchen. And I don't know. Like I just remember seeing an eyebrow. I don't know why I just see one. It was like one bushy eyebrow. I don't remember the color like in full shape. I just remember it being bushy.
She described his clothing again, stating the male was wearing black long sleeves, black pants, and black boots. At the end of the interview, Dylan Mortensen drew the mask for the interviewer. While drawing, she gave a consistent description of the mask and noted the eyebrows. I don't remember if I saw one or two, like it was just weird. On December 29th, 2022, Brian Kohberger was arrested in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. The following day, on December 30th, 2022, 47 days after her first interview, Dylan Mortensen was interviewed by Idaho State Police. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. Detective Joe Lake and Gary Tolleson in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Defendant's Exhibit Number 9. Dylan Mortensen was asked about Brian Kohberger. Dylan Mortensen was asked, have you seen a picture of Mr. Kohberger? Dylan responded, yeah, I looked him up today when I found out regarding what picture she saw. She stated, I've seen the mugshot, one with the vest thing, I think. The interviewer asked, this Brian Kohberger, the person that you saw in this mugshot, is that the person you saw in your house? Dylan Mortensen responded,
I have no clue. From what I remember, I just remember seeing this figure that was like not fat, obviously, but more of like the skinnier tone bill and some mask on. I don't know what the mask exactly was. But when I thought about it, it was just like covering here and here. I don't know if it was covering his mouth, his nose, or below his mouth and nose. I just remember knowing that he was white, but I didn't know how he was white. I just knew he was. And this knowing there's like I knew he had looked at me because of the bushy eyebrows. That's all, or the bushy eyebrow. That's all I remember. But I have no idea what he looked like. I don't like when I was looked at his picture, nothing came back to me at all. So that like I don't know. I feel like if I saw that, my mind would be like, oh yeah, that's him. But it's just I don't remember at all.
So I'm going to refrain from the statements I made before about cross-examining this young woman. We get all kinds of comments, and let me have it down below if you think that I'm being, less than kind. I'm just thinking from the point of view of a trial attorney, and this is a case that will go to trial. And these are the thoughts I think that any attorney would have. Regarding Dylan Mortensen telling Bethany Funk the male had a big nose, Dylan stated,
all I remember, but I don't remember big nose at all, like at all. That's like all I remember is some bushy eyebrow and all black and some sort of mask, but it wasn't like one of those circle ski masks. That's all I remember.
So going forward to May 15th of 2023, now 183 days after Dylan Mortensen's first interview, Dylan Mortensen testified at the grand jury proceeding for the above listed matter. See State's Exhibit Number S4. Regarding November 13th, 2022, Ms. Mortensen testified she woke up at around 4 o'clock to noises, parenthetically music, Murphy, talking, and or singing. Dylan testified that she opened her door and heard a man's voice say, it's okay, I'm going to help you. And I didn't know who the man's voice was. Dylan Mortensen testified that she opened her door again and saw
a figure in all black, which I believe was a person. I knew the person was white. I don't know how, but I just knew it. Knew it was male. I think it was because of the voice. The person was around my height or a few inches taller. And then I knew his build wasn't like scrawny and he wasn't fat. So I figured it was like the basketball toned, lean build.
Regarding what the person was wearing, Dylan Mortensen testified.
There was like, from what I remember, it was like a black mask, almost like a ski mask, but not. It just covered the head and then maybe up to the mouth, maybe more. I can't remember if it was covered just the chin, the mouth, or the nose or lower.
And so this pretty much concludes the facts part of the motion. And then we go into the argument. You're supposed to set forth all of the facts up top and then go into the argument. But as you're going to see, this objection doesn't necessarily follow that format. Argument. Dylan Mortensen's statements are independently reliable as law enforcement did not employ a witness identification procedure, triggering a Manson-Biggers balancing test, which we're going to get into, as you might have guessed. The United States Supreme Court has held that due process requires the exclusion of identification evidence if police suggestiveness creates the substantial risk of mistaken identification. So in the classic case, you can't have police giving a suggestive kind of a lineup. For example, they just bring the defendant in off the street and he hasn't showered for 3 days and his clothes are dirty and his hair is all ruffled. And then for the other 4 or 5 people in the lineup, they brought in detectives that have their ties and their suits and their nicely coiffed hair and all of that, and then asked the defendant to pick the one out of the lineup. Obviously, that's a bad example of a suggestive lineup. So the question is, was Dylan and were her observations okay? Did they pass this test? Reliability is the linchpin in determining the admissibility of identification testimony. And we don't have to get that deeply into this because I think it's fairly obvious where they're going with it. The Supreme Court gave several factors to be considered under the totality of the circumstances to determine whether an identification was reliable. The reliability factors to be employed after a witness identification are as follows. 1, the opportunity of the witness to view the criminal at the time of the crime. So the answer to that, and we won't go through their full analysis, but the answer to that is that, yeah, she viewed him, but how good was the view? 2, the witness's degree of attention. Well, she admits that she was drunk. She's a college kid. There's nothing wrong with that. She wasn't driving. She was at her house. So what? But, not even sure that she's come out of it yet. Kind of goes to her degree of attention, wouldn't you say?
Oh, and it also just sounded like she was very consistently not confident in her answer, even up to seeing Kohberger himself. So
so the accuracy of his or her prior description of the criminal, well, it went back and forth. The thing that troubles me is she goes back and forth between saying she only saw one eyebrow and then she saw 2 eyebrows. No, she saw one eyebrow. She didn't know what color it was. She couldn't see his eyes. Well, if you can't describe the eyes, how can you describe the eyebrows? Aren't they like mine are next to each other? I don't know.
I mean, my logic, the way that I see it, is that it was dark and shady, and maybe they had a protruding brow bone that was putting some shadow over their eyes. I don't think that's too out of the question, but she also had no other description. So I think it makes sense that in the shadows, like maybe that's where the light like reflected on. But at the same time, she didn't even have a way to describe what she did see.
Yeah, so you're as uncertain as she is. 4, the level of certainty demonstrated at the identification, and this is lacking. In my view, we're going to see that they kind of, put a Band-Aid over this one. But 5, the length of time between the crime and the identification. Well, they've got that one because she gave a statement right away that morning. She gave her that early afternoon. So they've got, a couple of these go their way, a couple of them don't go their way. And this is really typical in the law, no matter what you're talking about, whether you're talking about negligence in a medical malpractice case or the elements of first-degree murder. There are factors you have to consider, and you might have 2 of the 3 or 4 of the 5 factors, and you kind of punt on the other one. And in my view, that's what the prosecution is doing here, to be fully objective. But in any event, I think we don't need to go over all of their analysis, because I think I just kind of summarized it, and I think I did an accurate job. 5 times Dylan Mortensen uses the term bushy to describe the eyebrows, and so she is consistent in that. Regarding identification, after Brian Kohberger was arrested, Dylan Mortensen was interviewed. She relayed that she saw a mugshot of the Brian Kohberger on the internet. Detective Lake asked her, "Is this the Brian Kohberger, the person that you saw in this mugshot? Is that the person you saw in your house?" Dylan responds, "I have no clue." So that doesn't help the prosecution in this case. So the next argument is that even if the court applies the test under the totality of the circumstances, we can kind of spackle over the holes in her statements. Defendant states Mr. Kohberger does not have bushy eyebrows. This is Brian Kohberger's argument. And I think it's subjective. I think if you asked 100 different people if Mr. Kohberger had bushy eyebrows, you wouldn't get unanimity. Do you think you'd get unanimity?
Let's find out. Comment down below if you think Andrew has bushy eyebrows.
Comment down below if you think Brian Kohberger has bushy eyebrows. So the state intends to introduce a photograph of Brian Kohberger taken from his phone. So this is the dun-dun-dun moment in this motion. The state intends to introduce a photograph of Brian Kohberger taken from his phone on November 13th, 2022, only hours after the homicides at 10:31 a.m.
Dun, dun, dun.
And this is where we, for the very first time, got this exhibit. There it is, attached as exhibit number S-5. So, I wonder, all these months we've been talking about this has been redacted and that's been secret, and the other thing has been shielded behind the non-dissemination order. I wonder how many other things we don't know. You know what I mean? There's a saying about sometimes know-it-alls, unlike me, of course, know-it-alls don't even know what they don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've known people enough that they just think they know everything. And the way they talk down to you, they don't know what they don't know. And that's the position that we're in here. What else is there? What else is there? So that's the picture that he took allegedly on November 13th of 2022 at 10:31. And then we'll get back to the motion. We have a little bit more to say about this before we move on. The other exhibit is his Pennsylvania driver's license. Pennsylvania driver's license for Brian Kohberger. And the thing that was relevant about this is, how Dylan Mortensen says that she is 5'10", and she thought that the intruder was 6 feet. This is why they put the driver's license in. See that height, 6 feet. Mm-hmm. So that corroborates, I think we have to admit that her conflicting statements are a little bit shaky. It can be argued either way, granted. And I think the state makes a good argument. But there can be a good argument on the other side. But this is, it's like stacking up different things in a case. Putting a case together is like putting a puzzle together. And this is one piece that does, in fact, fit, that Dylan Mortensen, although she may not be, certain, she may not be clear, she may admit that she had a few the night before, at least there's this, that she said she was 5'10", the intruder was 2 feet, she thinks, taller than she was. And here you've got Mr. Kohberger's driver's license saying that he's 6 feet. So, all right.
It's like also, obviously, like how people present themselves isn't really an indication of like their mental well-being, but it's also, I don't know if disturbing or sad is the word to think about this, but in all these pictures, he's like smiling. So whether it's like his driver's license, he was smiling, or in that other picture in the bathroom, like I don't want to believe that he was smiling a few hours after these murders, or that is capable of being this person. But at the same time, like we said, innocent until proven guilty. It's also eerie to like think of that whole concept of taking the selfie a few hours after such a terrible crime and being happy about in it.
And they will go back to that to jump to another issue that's been brought up in all of this flurry of filings, is that you're right. He's smiling in all these pictures, and that kind of belies one of the other arguments that the defense has, that Mr. Kohberger is on the autism spectrum and he has OCD. And the arguments they're making are that if he's on the autism spectrum and he's where he is on that spectrum, and if he has OCD, there's no way that he would have been able to commit the atrocious crimes that are alleged in the indictment. That's their first argument. And the second argument, which they make in their papers, are that Mr. Kohberger's demeanor belies any conclusions that the jury might make. They're saying that, he tends to have a blank stare on his face. He tends to look very serious. He tends to have a look that his demeanor is such that it's not going to be a positive for the jury. Then you look at Mr. Smiley standing in the shower, and then you see the new photo that they released when the new mugshot that was released when he was taken down to Ada County in Boise. So it was a good point that you raised about he's kind of smiling in these pictures, and I don't know if that's a good argument for the defense.
I don't know. I mean, there's so many crazy people that can be smiling and happy, so I agree that it's not a good argument, but it's also, I can't imagine being the perpetrator of those M's, and I cannot imagine any feeling of satisfaction and smiling and not being completely horrified at yourself or feeling accomplished after that. The whole thing is eerie and bizarre.
So the final spackling that the defense is trying to use to patch over what they don't have is the accuracy of the description of Mr. Kohberger matches Dylan Mortensen's descriptions. Male, white, skinny, athletic build. He's certainly not a rotund individual. A few inches taller than Dylan Mortensen. Here it is, 5'10", not someone she knew. Bushy eyebrows. And here we go. See the state's Exhibit S5, which we just looked at. Brian Kohberger's Pennsylvania driver's license listing him as 6 feet. Fourth, the only thing I'll say to that is I can't remember the last time they measured me for a driver's license. I can't. And, people's heights change. I went to the doctor and they said I'd gone down an inch. And they explained to me that happens as one ages. Wait until you hear this. I heard it already. So,
well, I'll have you know that I went to the doctor last year and they told me I gained an inch.
Wow. Well, you're still young enough that you can grow. But, I wasn't asking you to violate HIPAA and tell us about your medical condition. So, we won't inquire into that anymore. But fourth, regarding the level of certainty, Dylan Mortensen texted Bethany Funk a description immediately after her observations. She was interviewed on 5 separate occasions, and she provided grand jury testimony. Dylan Mortensen, without fail, gave the same description, which in and of itself indicates her level of certainty. On November 17th, 2023, she relayed to investigators she was suffering from trauma and was unsure whether it was real or not. Dylan Mortensen admitted many times she was probably still intoxicated.
I don't know if I was still drunk. Probably was. I don't know for sure. I was really asleep. I woke up out of nowhere, and I was obviously probably still a little bit drunk. I just woke up. I don't remember fully.
Admittedly, Dylan Mortensen made statements such as,
I believe I was also very drunk. I don't know how much of this was real. I don't know if my mind was doing whatever. I don't know any of it. Half of the stuff, I don't know if it's a dream or if it's real. I just have no clue.
But the investigators told Dylan Mortensen they only wanted Dylan Mortensen to focus on what she knew was true.
That's most important.
Dylan Mortensen agreed, and after this, Ms. Mortensen provided the same descriptions with absolutely no variance. Dylan Mortensen also made it clear the eyebrows are the feature she most clearly remembered. It is evident by the degree of detail she provided about the events leading up to, during, and after the crimes that she provided reliable descriptions. Now, I never went to school to be a detective. I have worked with investigators, but I never went to school to learn the standard operating procedure of investigators. But she was interviewed on 5 separate occasions. 5. And then in addition to that, as I read this, she provided grand jury testimony. So 6 different statements. There's bound to be some discrepancies that any defense attorney that's worth the price of reasonable doubt would be able to dig into. And so,
but she's also like still in all of these times where she's providing these statements unsure, and it's okay that she is unsure even though she's providing inconsistent statements, but that doesn't prove any certainty when every time has an element of I don't know.
So, they go on and they talk about how all of this applies to the law in Idaho. And the Idaho evidentiary law seems to be fairly similar to, if not exactly the same, as the federal rules of evidence. So, in conclusion, the state respectfully requests this court rule consistently with its previous findings that Dylan Mortensen is credible and competent to testify, and to allow Dylan Mortensen to testify at trial regarding her recollection of the male she saw in her residence during the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, as having bushy eyebrows, because the evidence is relevant and admissible. So all of that we just read together, all of that goes to the prosecution. William Thompson and attorney Nye are objecting to Brian Kohberger's attorney filing a motion that she didn't want any mention of bushy eyebrows. So
what a hill to die on. If that's what they want to go by, fine, but there's a million different descriptions for bushy eyebrows, and I have like an element of like, geez, or it's just like, yeah, no, it's consistent, it's fact. It's just like, even in her statements, she's saying like, I don't know, and stuff like that. It's just like, I guess they decided for her, and maybe she does genuinely at this point feel confident over her saying the bushy eyebrows thing. And I don't deny that the person probably had bushy eyebrows, but it's funny that she's like, I don't know. And then the state is like, well, she didn't know 4 times in a row, so that means it was consistent.
Well, there are arguments on both sides, but it would seem that the whole case kind of hinges on a bunch of puzzles. This case is a puzzle, and for 2 years now, we have been prognosticating, guessing, and because so few pieces have been unveiled, people have gone down into the tunnels. People have talked about the Banfield. People have talked about this fuzzy wuzzy was a car. They've talked about other activity on, I believe, was it Linda Lane, where there were kids out, and when they have a picture of a kid by a dumpster. I mean, there have been so many sidebars in this case that it's kind of hard to remember them all. And we've tried to stay away from all that. And yes, I do read the comments where people say, did you see what so-and-so said? Yeah, I saw it, but that's their gig, and that's fine. If they want to have that gig, all the more power to them. We have a different gig. And I think that's why YouTube exists, so there can be 1,000, if not 1,000,000 different people saying different things. So now the next piece of the puzzle is, guess what? Mr. Kohberger bought a knife. He bought a K-bar knife, and the contact. These things are just coming out in dribs and drabs, and you read a motion that you think, okay, this is just another boring motion, and I'll admit that's what I thought this was at first. But then I read it and I went, oh my God, get out the dent. This is the state's response to defendant's motion in limine number 9, excluding Amazon click activity evidence at trial. In other words, they sent subpoenas out. I'll save reading all of this to just tell you that they sent out subpoenas to a bunch of different places, and one of them was to Amazon. And the defense says, what's this Amazon click activity? That's irrelevant, and it has nothing to do with anything, and we want to exclude it. All right, okay, that's fine. Okay, here's the argument. This is the state's response. to the defendant saying, we don't want the Amazon click activity. Okay. All right. And this is history that we've kind of gone into in the past. Remember our old friend, Forensic Frenzy? She went into a great deal of depth with respect to all of the subpoenas that were sent out and what the returns may have been. And what did all of this indicate? And is there a pattern? Well, so we're reading along, and we get to page 4. Further, in this case, the evidence at issue is complete. The defendant argues that the data the state has disclosed to the defendant is extremely narrow when compared to the more inclusive and broad warrants and subpoenas. But this argument is incorrect. To confirm, the state has disclosed to the defendant all data, including clickstream data. Is that a word? Clickstream? I guess so.
Probably.
Okay.
That makes sense because if your clicks are in a stream, you do a lot of things at once.
All right. I can see that point. The state,
sounds scientific enough.
Okay. The state narrowly tailored a search warrant for evidence regarding the crimes of homicide or burglary, including at 1122 King Road. This included temporal limitations based on the officer's investigation, which limited the search from March 20th, 2022 through March 30th, 2022. Parenthetically, time it was known Brian Kohberger purchased a K-bar knife with sheath and a sharpener from Amazon.com. Wait, what?
Dun, dun, dun.
Here we are. Over 2 years into this case, and people like me complaining, oh, everything's been kept secret. There's been a non-dissemination order. Everything's been redacted. We don't know anything. There's so much that we don't know, like I just said a minute ago. There's too many missing pieces. And wait a minute. They hide this on page 4 in the parentheses that Mr. Kohberger purchased a K-bar knife with a sheath and a sharpener from Amazon.com. What?
That I think is one of the biggest pieces too that a lot of people were talking about on our channel. Where it's like, oh, there was a knife show that happened right before. Did he get the knife there? And something that's weird to me about this too, it's interesting as to one, how much more earlier before the M's even happened that this occurred. He wasn't even close by yet. But then not only that, but it's interesting to think that if this person had an interest in this topic and had been planning this and thinking about this for a while, why would you leave a paper trail like that, a digital trail that's so easily found?
I know, because everybody knows they follow you. We were having this conversation before. Actually, I wanted to buy Lily the dog some supplements, glucosamine chondroitin, because she has pretty bad arthritis. And I remembered I bought these certain tablets a couple of years ago, and I hadn't bought them since, and I figured maybe I'll try them again. And all I had to do was go into Amazon.com. Everything I've ever bought in the last years it's kind of scary. I mean, I've bought office equipment and stuff for the dog and birthday presents for people, but don't ever buy the crime weapon. Don't ever buy and this guy is a criminology student. Really?
Mm-hmm. But it's also, I'm beyond the digital trail too, and this is just me playing devil's advocates. Please comments don't say, wow, you guys are the sympathizers, wow, you guys are such guilters, da, 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 da. But it's also like, even if it was his knife, even if he bought the knife and it belonged to him, that doesn't mean that somebody else didn't use it. So,
all right, you're right.
Like, I'm going too deep,
right.
But
you're making the argument that has been made. You're making exactly the argument. Very smart. You made the argument that has been made. Just because he bought a K-bar knife off of Amazon.com doesn't mean that he committed the crime. Just because there's a smidgen of touch DNA of his on the sheath doesn't mean he did the crime. Just because he has bushy eyebrows doesn't mean he committed the crime. Just because there was a Hyundai Elantra driving around that neighborhood that didn't have a front license plate doesn't mean he committed the crime. Do you see where I'm going with this? They're all little pieces, but you fit them together, it starts to come together, and I'm not fully, totally, completely convinced yet. I'm not. My mind is still open. I still give him the presumption of innocence. But do you see where I'm going with this? That they are, if
building
it's a 1,000-piece puzzle, whereas before we had 100 pieces, I think now we have 350 pieces. So it begins to come together. But beyond all reasonable doubt, I would say is 99 pieces of the puzzle. You can still have one missing. There can still be a reasonable doubt. And I think you put your finger on it, and you saved us a lot of time because I was going to read a lot of stuff. Now, don't you get mad when you're watching an infomercial or something like that, and the guy says, "But wait, there's more." Don't you hate that?
But Andrew, does that mean that there's more?
Oh, wait, there's more. This has a K-bar knife with a sheath and a sharpener that was purchased in 2022. Well, all right. Reading along. This is simply not true unless you consider seeking other items of evidentiary value. Cherry picking irrelevant click activity on Kohberger's account would not provide any relevant context to Kohberger's actual click activity, i.e., purchase of a K-bar knife with sheath before the murderers, and his click activity indicating a search for a knife with a sheath after the murders. So, doesn't prove anything. Maybe he liked knives. Maybe he wanted another one. Maybe he lost it. Maybe somebody took it and went down to Moscow, Idaho, and committed the crime, and somebody took it and he wanted to buy another one. We don't know that. But again, this is a major thing that's just kind of hidden. It's just kind of hidden in this motion. So, and then the phrase is included mid-page 5, I think we're on. Yeah. Kohberger's click activity shows a purchase of a K-bar knife and sheath before the homicides. Makes it more probable than it would be without the evidence. So you're right. It doesn't prove anything. It really doesn't prove anything, but it's just, putting it all together. It's another piece in the puzzle. Now, we don't know. We sit here today, a year and several months after the crime, and we don't know what we don't know. So why don't we close by asking our viewers, is this enough? Is this enough? Did these two things, the purchase of the K-bar knife and the new picture, does this new evidence prove anything? Did this move the needle in your mind? Does this make you think any more that he may be guilty or not guilty? Or the other question is, what do you think? What do you think? Do you still think he's innocent, or is your mind made up? Even if your mind is all made up, what else is out there? What else could be out there? Now, we've been sitting here for all this time. We didn't know about the K-bar. Now, sure, people speculated, but I'm talking about actual knowledge. So don't know. How many more pieces of the puzzle might be out there? That's my final question. Do you have any final thoughts for us today?
My final question to the audience is, how likely are you to buy your M weapon on Amazon? The thing is, it's just like, there's so many things about this case where it's just like, obviously, I'm never going to find myself in this situation. I'm not the kind of person to even really want to go buy knives. I know there's people that have knife collections. I know there's people that like taxidermy. I know people have all types of crazy things, but it's just like, I can't put myself in the situation. I can't even think of what it's like to do that. But then even beyond that, I see all this stuff. I'm like, well, I wouldn't have bought it on Amazon. I would have walked to a store that's a tiny little shop with no cameras and used cash.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost an argument in his favor that if he studied with some great professors in Pennsylvania, he was accepted into a PhD program in criminology, which means that he had a lot of knowledge about these things. He studied on mock crime scenes back in Pennsylvania. So it's almost an argument in his favor. If he's this smart and he's this brilliant and he knows so much about these things, he would never do such a stupid thing as buying stuff on Amazon.com when even Attorney Myers knows that everything he's ever bought is right there. So that's my closing thought.
Closing thought, my mailman will call me out for the things we order. We got a box of cereal and our mailman's like, oh, we got your cereal here. You're really trusting someone else to deliver that. Anyway, that's my rant.
So let us know what you think. Does this change your mind at all? Or are the people that think he's guilty still say he's guilty, and the people that think he's innocent still think he's innocent? So Have a good one.
Whether you are in the grocery store, the gas station, or anywhere else, please remember to be kind to people. You don't know what they're going through. And the same goes for our comments section. We want you to comment, but be nice, be kind, be positive if you can. And thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Have a good one.